nature and environment is something which I have learned to discover. And over the years, I am fascinated and find more and more things out of it. But what's very important is the sort of learning which you get. Humans think of themselves as some great planners and managers and everything else. And then we discover that when we build a habitat, we lead to so much waste, for instance. And then you see how in nature, this whole concept of waste doesn't exist. The whole thing is cyclical. What comes out of one process becomes an input into another process. And it's sustainable. It's sustainable, it develops. Each leaf is a particular angle for a particular reason. It's maximizing sunlight, it is seeing the moisture, everything else. So seemingly people come and see a forest and say, oh, this looks all random. But it's not random. It's a phenomenal order in which everything works without top-level management, if you like. And so I've come to not only love nature, but sort of be fascinated by it and trying to see how much we can learn from it. But we must also realize that it is the support base for all human activity. And for many years, humans felt that you could spoil nature, you could throw things in nature, and somehow nature will take care of it. It was big enough. But today, that is no longer the case. I mean, post the Industrial Revolution, one by one, we realize that we are impacting the very foundation on which our society lives. And when climate change happened, when the rapid loss in biodiversity happened, this was like a wake-up call that our impact is not minimal. It is something which will actually destroy the planet. So I think from being fascinated for it to then respecting it, to seeing that we need to protect it, to the fact that we need to understand it. And all that really needs to go into education at its very foundation. And that's the sort of basis of environmental education, that it starts with understanding the world in which we live, the world which is around us, and how we are really, in a sense, a part of that world. Well, it needs to be a symbiotic relationship where instead of really destroying that foundation, we strengthen it. And you can only strengthen something if you understand it and respect it. And the point is, it is possible. This false debate between development and environment really needs to come to an end, because there are any number of examples where we can enhance it. A good environmental policy will actually lead to more jobs, not less jobs. We ourselves here have an office, which is a full-fledged office, but just look around and you will see a density of trees and birds and everything, which is quite phenomenal. And it brings down the temperature by 5 degrees. It's saving electricity for me. It's making it a nicer environment. So the thing is that it is possible to do that, and that is actually the natural state. And India actually is a country where we have spoken about this from the Vedas onwards. It's not as if it's some new discovery. We've always understood this. It is a false sense of modernization which has taken us away, and we have to realize we have to go back to those roots and learn from it. I really can't say that as a child I was too fascinated by birds and animals and all that. It was I really can't say that. It was, I mean, more than any other child. But it was, I think, when we came back from when I was studying abroad, and my son Mohal, who was still maybe 5 years or 4 years old, used to love planes there. And in India, that was a hobby which was useless, because in those days there used to be only maybe 2 types of planes and 3 types of cars. So he started asking questions about birds and things in our garden. And frankly, I didn't know these. So that's when I heard about Salim Ali and that books he wrote, and went and found it. And it was out of print, so I had to go several times, and I got that book. And then we came to know about his work in Hingolgarh, where I met Lav Kumar Khachar and Darbar Sahib and others. We started looking around. We met Dr. Salim Ali. I went to Chennai because I heard about Romulus Whittaker, and I brought him here. It was a monsoon like it is now. And he said, let's go out tonight. So I said, okay. And he showed me so many snakes. And then we were sitting in this office. It was not here actually that time. And he said, let us just go out. And he just went out and pulled out 2 cobras from within 20 feet of where I was sitting. And I said, my God, look at this. I mean, I'm sitting here without knowing this. We had Professor Mohan Ram from Botany Department of Delhi. And he would talk to us about every plant here. And you would not be able to stop listening to him. You forgot lunch and everything else. It was just so fascinating. So I made a conscious effort and to learn about these things and know about it. And then spend time on my own, going to camps. Camping became a very major attraction, going out into nature, going out into wildlife parks. We met Mr. H.S. Pawar, who was at that time Project Tiger Head, and he took us around Kanha National Park. We started doing projects with them. On this hill itself, we started planting trees. And I didn't know how many trees there were. But when we started bringing them, we now have 120 varieties of trees here. And I said, my God, is this the variety? And they are not foreign trees. They are all local Deshi trees. But that is the variety. And there's still more to come. And every tree brings with it its own birds and other things come there. So it's been a sort of like a whole discovery of the world around us. And it's been fascinating. Journey on this campus started with doing things almost instinctively. We used to have a cactus fence, and there were cattle herders who lived around us, Rabaris, Bharwad communities, and they would just open it up and their cattle would come and nothing would grow. And they would, our chokidar would complain that they come and steal this and they do this. So we called them here and we said, we want to build this institution. We want to green this hill, but we can only do it with your cooperation. And we know that you come and do this, but I know you want water, which we have. So come in from the front gate and take the water. You are after all our neighbors. Your children can come in and pick the Ziziphus. In Gujarati we call it boar. The Ziziphus boar. You can cut the grass and take it out for cattle if you like, but no cattle. So they went aside and came back in a few minutes. They said, it's a deal. Sounds fair. Now, the words like social fencing and, people's involvement in this thing, all those came later. It was not sort of some theory. It was out of just a normal neighborly feeling that we said that and once you did it in cooperation, this whole hill started coming up. So that started our first program, where we said that if we can green a place like this, why can't we green all of Gujarat for that matter? And we started doing projects of social forestry, which later became joint forest management, involving communities, taking ownership, growing things. And these have been very, very successful. So those became the initial programmatic things. But our first programs were not only looking at the natural environment. We were looking at the social environment. And we were looking at Ahmedabad city. And in those days, in the late 70s, the year 2000 seemed very far away. It was like 2050 today. So when you ask people, what should Ahmedabad be like in 2000? They said, oh my God, that far away, And it was interesting that most of what people said were social objectives. One of them which stuck in my mind was they said that a woman should be able to see a late night movie and even with jewelry be able to go home without feeling scared. Okay? We are talking about women's issues in those days. And I said, on the one hand, we have these building plans, FSI, how tall building should be, zoning. On the other hand, we have social issues. If we don't know the relationship between these two, we cannot build a city. So that started us looking at the social environment. And so we started looking at the social and the environment, natural environment, and how these two have lessons for each other and how they merge. And finally, the economic situation. And we felt that unless environmental education really brought in the economic aspects, unless you dealt with how human development would happen, then you cannot really save the thing. And if you remember, in 72, the United Nations had its first major conference on environment and on the human environment. And they had invited heads of government from all over. Swedish Prime Minister was there, but the only one who accepted that invitation was Indira Gandhi. And she went there and she made the statement that environment and development have as two sides of the coin. She was talking about poverty. She said you cannot remove poverty unless you protect the environment, and you cannot protect the environment unless you remove poverty. So poverty and environment are not two different subjects. They are two ways of looking at the same thing. The biomass and the environment is our strategy for this. And that then grew into what today we call sustainable development. So our whole transition as CEE was from what might be called more environmental education to education for sustainable development. But our roots, when we wrote our first proposal here in 83, in 84 we were actually formed. By this time we were doing the city program, we were doing a forestry program, we were doing school education, we were doing a number of different things. But this gave us, the formation of CEE gave us the opportunity to do something nationally. And we had dreamt in those days, okay, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could reach out to every district in India? And the Paryavaran Mitra dream has enabled that. Today Paryavaran Mitra is available in every district of India in 15, 16 major languages. And that is how we started, with that dream. But as we went through this whole journey, we realized that we needed different things. And that's how the center has grown. You see, firstly, you must remember that the amount of environmental work which is in the textbooks was in fact not there when CE was started. We have a lot to do with the fact that some of this is there today. We've been working continuously with NCRT, with others, and trying to see with the new educational policy, with the educational framework, to see that more and more materials go into the schools. And that's a good thing in the thing. Then we found that there were also good club activities happening. And the Ministry of Environment itself has something called the NGC, the National Green Corps. So that was happening also, other activities. But we felt that Paryavaran, or the environment, is not something which is a subject like other subjects where you just learn about it. It is something to be experienced. It requires an activity, it requires people going out. It requires changed roles of actors within the classroom. And that approach is something which doesn't come just out of some instructions. It requires working together. And CE as a national organization, which also is connected internationally with some of the best programs in the world, we are in the know of how some of these things are done. There might be small tricks of doing things. And we felt that this would be the medium to do it. So the Paryavaran Mitra schools are schools which then connect to CE, but we enhance work through the curriculum itself. So that now that the curriculum has created the space and created the opportunity, how to do it and what you can do is something which Paryavaran Mitra really helps you do that. The Paryavaran Mitra program itself is to get students ready for this modern world which is there. It is a program which builds leadership. It builds people's skills, understanding of the environment, and to be able to understand how you need at times to do critical thinking. You need to ask yourself questions. You need to see the same point from different perspectives. We have a group which is working with people on the seashore, for instance, and there they go and talk to fishermen. And how do the fishermen see the same problem? How does the hotel person who is building a hotel next door see it? How does the tourism person see it? How does someone who is conserving turtles on the beach, they might see it differently. How does someone who is dredging see it differently, So you understand the complexities of this thing, and try and understand that life is not sort of just a simple thing. You cannot just protect nature in national parks and sanctuaries or through a textbook, but you cannot protect them just like that. Nature has to be protected where you are, and much of that is to do with this. A lot of things are also to do with what we don't consider nature in the sense, but it's to do, for instance, food. Now, food itself is a fascinating thing to teach about. People don't necessarily know what all this is. That little spice which they add, how does it grow, where does it come from, all that has to, why is it important to have seasons, why do people eat in seasons, and things like that. So I think we have opportunities really all over, but how to grasp that opportunity is not necessarily known to people. So Paryavaran Mitra tells and works with the teacher, gives the manual of how you do that. So it basically enhances and builds on the school curriculum. People see that what they do make a difference. I think it changes the way they look upon education. Paryavaran Mitra in its logo uses the handprint. The handprint came about through an earlier school program we were doing in Andhra Pradesh, and that hand belongs to a 10-year-old girl called Shrija in St. Mary's School in Hyderabad. And that school, when they were doing this work, and we talk about the footprint as our impact on the globe, they said, look, enough about all these negative things. We also have our own Shakti, our own strength. So the handprint represents positive action. And Paryavaran Mitra uses that handprint as its logo. And that is to show positive action. So our education program doesn't end with knowledge or ends with skill. It goes into doing something. We go to schools where children take up the whole job of saving electricity in their school, and they actually see the bill going down. There's something that happened, or conserving water, or bringing in plant species which might not exist, or growing their own kitchen garden, or save leaking taps. So people start thinking that we can use our education for the betterment of life and the betterment of environment, and the two go together. And I think the excitement of Paryavaran Mitra is really that. It's interesting because the classical teacher used to be the person who had the knowledge and they were giving knowledge to you. Now that is not possible in Paryavaran Mitra as much. First of all, the teacher does not know. Most people don't know. If you say, what are the leaves around, then I don't have a book which tells me what the leaves are. So in many ways, I would rather not tell you about the leaves, because suppose the student asks me, what is this leaf? I don't know what the answer is. So we tell the Paryavaran Mitra teacher that firstly, you must know and feel confident that you can get up in class and saying, I don't know. Let's find out together. Let's search it together. So that changes the role of the teacher. The teacher has to become a facilitator. They are running a process of learning, and they are learning with the students, but they are the facilitating, they are helping them to learn. So the Paryavaran Mitra teacher has to unlearn and learn a lot of new skills of how to do it. And I suppose that the journey of discovery would be its own rewards. I think to see your own students becoming confident individuals who take up leadership in this nation, for any teacher, that's great. To see your students with that confidence, with that smile, with the feeling of efficacy, with the feeling of understanding, and not just bogged down by textbooks and this and that. And that's the joy. I've seen when we have our Paryavaran Mitra functions, and all the people come from different schools and they're displaying it. You should see that face. You can look at their teacher's face and see how proudly they're seeing how their students are explaining things. And I think for a teacher, really, that is a joy. to see young people come up and do things. The teachers are learning, the teachers are getting new things, but they are developing a new type of confidence, and they are seeing a new role for the school. The school is now connected to the community. Even the new thinking of the connection between parents and teachers. Sometimes the parents come and say, but why are you doing this? This is not in the textbook. Huh? How will this help with marks? Yes, but how do you get parents and teachers to talk to each other? So the teachers are hopefully getting new skills. We also have things like best teacher prizes and all that. So, that also is a type of encouragement. But the real joy has to be learning and opening new things. Well, just think that, the Paryavaran Mitra currently going to 2 lakh schools, and if you have 2 crore over the next few years, if you have 2 crore children who have gone through a program like this and have that, surely it has an impact on India. You had asked me earlier about my own interest in nature and how whether Dr. Salim Ali would have ever said, okay, my book led to some guy called Kartikeya getting interested and then doing something, and perhaps that was not how he saw it, but he hoped that it would do. So where these thoughts and things go, we don't know. Every other day we hear about some story of some child who has gone through a program who has done something great, and we feel good. We feel good that look, something which you did, someone has saved some seeds, someone has done something else, new things are happening. So it's never a waste. It's not a waste. But I must say that if you look at your own, anyone looking at their own childhood and saying, what do I remember? If you've done an activity or gone out on a camp or done something, you probably remember that more than you will remember that in so-and-so class, the teacher taught me this on the board and I wrote it down. That's okay. It's all inside. But when you get a direct experience, it's an imprint on yourself is much deeper. And if I've actually led to something which has changed, then it's very, very deep. And I think not all 2 crores are going to be big leaders, but those 2 crore children, many of them, in their own ways, in their own lifestyles, feel they change. I was in Assam recently, and I was talking to some of the mothers, because in Assam, they have a system that they all come there to school. And I was asking what. They said, no, the children come home now and tell us to segregate waste. They tell us don't waste water. Cook in a way in which energy is saved. And so children are now telling their parents what some of these concepts are. There are some projects which tackle decision makers immediately, and you will see that impact. Some things take time before you see all the fruits. It's the difference between if you go a wheat plant, then in 4 months or 5 months you will get the wheat. If you plant a mango tree, then maybe you have to wait a little longer before you get your mango. So education, school education is more like the mango tree than the wheat plant. You have to think of it as not in a very short-term basis, but you have to think that you're part of the process of transforming society, and the way people think, the way people see their own responsibility, and this thing of environmental education becoming compulsory in our school system. We are one of the few countries in the world where the Supreme Court of India has given a diktat. Yeah, not many countries in the world say that it has to be compulsory in every educational program. But in India it is. It's a compulsory part of every formal education program. It has to be. And the reason comes out from the Constitution. Because the Constitution said it is our duty to protect the environment. And so this public interest litigation said, how can I protect the environment if I don't know about it? And therefore, the judgment that you have to know about it. So it goes with that I think it's one thing to know of the shlokas and everything else which talk about this, but I should also have skills and knowledge how I can apply it. And I think that's what Paryavaran Mitra and the new educational processes does. much of the ideas of Paryavaran Mitra become part of the school ultimately. But everyone needs some new ideas keep on flowing, and Paryavaran Mitra is like a window in that school, if you like, from which fresh ideas keep coming, and ideas from one school go to another, and people share experiences. We have at the state level, we have Paryavaran Mitra events where people come together and best practices are shared. At the time of giving awards, people share information, they give a case study, they are inspirational. We do case studies and we bring them out in books. On our website we can see it. We want to do more and more video information now because people can see it and download it. So I think the whole communication revolution is also going to help this thing we are doing. Well, I mean, obviously one would like it to go to every school in India. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So it is something which is not sectoral. It's not something meant for only some. So we have to build it up. But we also have to build up the quality. Just now, while we might have reached 2 lakhs, I would say that maybe only 10% of them are truly what we want. Hopefully, the next 10% will come in, and the next, and this will happen through new techniques which we are doing. We are just initiating a new model by which we will have a resource person or a facilitator who will phone the school regularly and be available on phone. So every school will say that if I have a problem on this activity or something else, there is a phone number I can phone, and in my language I will have the answer. We want small YouTube type of videos, which like in a cookbook, you say I want to make whatever, rasam. Then I can go today and see 5 people demonstrating it. So I want to do the web of life game, then I should be able to see it in my language. So we want to make it easier and facilitate that process. Some of the stories of young people who've done something, it will be fascinating to interview them and record them, and you hear it from their voice instead of me telling you what they've done. The students themselves tell other students, and you put them up on the net. So I think it will revolutionize, and so I see over the next few years this material becoming widely available, downloadable on the web. What one requires is, besides, one of course requires finance to run a show like this. It's very cost effective. So per student, it's really nothing. So it becomes a very cost-effective program. One would like more people becoming mentors from the community and saying that, okay, I will give some amount of time to this. We, for instance, one of the societies connected with ISRO, with the space organization, they've got a network of members all over India. They said, why don't you put our names on the net? And if any school nearby wants a resource person to speak about what space is all about, then we will go and do it. We could do it with a number of experts. So we want to identify people in society who can say something about that particular field. It could be cultural heritage, it could be water conservation, it could be biodiversity, it could be sanitation, it could be electricity or energy, all the points which Paryavaran Mitra covers. So we would like that, and it becoming a movement. I think sometimes students require more opportunities to do it. So we want some student scholarships, some people who might say that we will give books to them or enable them to go to a camp, summer camp. So I think we are looking at partnerships, and I think we are so far done quite well. Well, I think the teachers, as you say, are at the whole center of education. There is no kit, no film, no teaching aid which replaces the teacher. And a good teacher actually doesn't require all these also. These are all help to the teacher. So it's ultimately the teacher who is the person. And the teacher has to take on this new role of building leadership and others. It's not, my role is not just to keep discipline, to see that the textbook is finished, everyone mugs up something and reproduces it. So it's a major transformation on what a teacher does, and the teacher also has to become a learning person, And I think a new generation of teachers will be very different from what our classical teachers used to be. A program as ambitious as Paryavaran Mitra, which reaches out to every district, every school, can only be done in partnership. And I think partners need to feel and take ownership of that and their role in that complex web which is being created. We have NGO partners in different places. And it's really nice. I mean, I was in Varanasi for some other thing, and there was an interview they wanted to say. So I had only few hours. So I phoned our Lucknow office and saying, I have this interview, I have no material, no nothing. He said, don't worry. And in 2 hours, I had 2 NGOs which are sitting next to me with all our materials, exactly telling us what we were doing in that district of Varanasi. And that was something fascinating, that you can virtually think of any place in India and you will find a person somewhere near there who is doing this work. And that sense of network, sense of belonging, sense that we are all working together to achieve a better India, ultimately. No, I think I shared some. I think the water conservation becomes one which people can see and sense very clearly. Because if there's a leaking tap and you keep a bucket and you measure that in 5 minutes how much water is leaked, you can actually measure it. People like things which they can measure improvement. So when they shut it, they know we've saved so much, electricity and other things. There's also great interest, which I was very happy to see, about biodiversity, about collecting all the seeds. We saw one school where they've got these small jars with every type of seed in their thing. But what really fascinates me is that when we are able to make the link between the student and someone who traditionally you have not thought about as a teacher. You know, you go to a school and you ask them who teaches you about plants. Who knows the most about plants? So they say my science teacher or botany teacher. I said, is there anybody else? No, I think she knows the most. Then I said, how about the gardener? So they don't think of the gardener as your teacher. And the gardener never thinks that he can come into the classroom and talks to the student. But then you bring the gardener into the classroom and actually he knows more about some of the practical aspects of plants than your botany teacher who might never have planted the tree. So how do you break that? In one school we were asking, what time do birds start calling in the morning? So the students said, we don't know. I mean, by the time we wake up, everything. So he said, who will know? Okay, then we came up with an answer that the Jamadar, the night watchman, would know. So I said, okay, go and talk to the night watchman and give them an activity sheet. So the next morning when the students come, they go to the night watchman, what time did you hear it? You know. So the night watchman also is not considered an educational staff, but becomes educational. Which bird did you hear? How many birds did you hear? So the point is, education doesn't only come from one source. And Paryavaran Mitra students need to understand that you need to be humble. You have to learn from everyone. And I think that is quite fascinating when we break that. Well, I think these are not particular spots where we will say, okay, today we are in equilibrium, because it's always a give and take. Someone will ask me, have you planted enough trees on this campus? And I say, no. Now today I want to plant 500 more trees on this campus, you know, because I understand that we don't have enough creepers, we don't have enough this, you know, I made a list with a gardener here. Okay, so there is no sort of point in that sense. We are also in a situation where a large part of our people are poor. There's gross malnourishment, there's water shortage, many parts of the country, electricity is not there. All these developments are going to happen. And each one coming about has a negative impact on the environment unless you know how to do it. So in spite of all the effort, to some extent it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. You know, how worse it will get will depend on how successful the program is. But to think that in a very short time we will all come to that stage, it's not there. But if you take educational programs, let's say we are dealing with children who are 10-year-old. I would say in another 10 years, they become young people starting. In another 20 years, they are people who are starting their families and will be teaching their children and taking responsibility. I would say that in that 20-year period, we should be able to see really something different. So that's what I'm saying. By the time these people become middle. There is some amount is done through ignorance, through education one can do it. For instance, when we built this campus, on the map itself, we drew all the trees. And the architect had to develop the buildings in such a way that the trees were not harmed. So the buildings look very odd if you just see the plan. Because they seem to go around and there's a tree in the middle of the building and all that. Many places, the architect's drawing does not even show the tree. So when they plan it, when they come to actually construct, they say, oh my God, what a beautiful tree, I have to cut it. Because if the map had only shown it, they would have changed the map. So there's a lot happening through ignorance. When they go to a shoreline and they start building, scouting area to build a port, if they only knew about the features, they could do it differently. So I think a lot can be done proactively through doing it. How to do it, what is the best practice can be done. People saving things. I mean, we were talking to some of the people involved in the car industry here, and they were saying that the difference between the person who really drives a car well and maintains their car well and the person who doesn't can be something like 20-25% saving in fuel. Now that's straight onto my pocket, if you could give that education. All right? So much of this makes good economic sense also for the individual and others, if you knew it. So I think that's the only way that conflict will go. I mean, if people understand that there is a way of doing it, but there's a better way of doing it.